And now we're joined by Ryan Gilbert. I forgot to hit the go live button, buddy. It's a kind of important part of the going live as we explore the new boundaries here. We were saying before we realized we weren't on the air, what's your experiences with New York City so far?
Well, as I just told you a moment ago, a lot of people, a lot of traffic, a lot of angry people, and it's fun. My first time being out here. It's a little different change of scenery than the Little Apple, but I'm happy to be here, Fitz. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. As I told you, it explains why people are always pissed off in New York City. There's constant noise and people, and it's just an assault on your senses. Okay, you were at Madison Square Garden today. You got to meet with the players and Coach Tang and see the facility. It's incredible. Just give me your overall thoughts on what you experienced today.
Yeah, well, we started off with players and inside of the locker room. Also had a chance to talk with Tang at the podium along with Noel and Johnson. And I would say just kind of the overall sort of takeaway, if you're looking for one from talking with those players, is I kind of asked them just about the scouting report and what sticks out about Michigan State and just how the Spartans can get it going in transition. I think 5 or 6 different players had to have mentioned how important it's going to be to stop them when they get the ball going up down the court. So obviously Michigan State's a very good 3-point shooting team. And you look at some of the numbers, a lot of stuff sticks out. But Tang and I don't know, Perry, whoever the assistant is on this scout is making it a big emphasis on stopping Michigan State going up and down the court. But fun day, Madison Square Garden's a special place, and you can absolutely tell that Noel and Ish Massoud and Tyke Green, Naquan Tomlin, it means so much for them to be playing here. And K-State's actually the number one, or I guess the highest rated seed out in this East region. So they get the New York Knicks locker room, and that it's just, you can tell how happy they are to be there. Yeah. Yep.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Is that an advantage, having the 4 guys from New York, or is it a distraction?
Well, I can't remember which player mentioned it. Somebody talked about how Michigan State also has a couple, New Yorkers on that roster as well. So I think if it were to be a distraction, I would say that would have happened against Montana State or Kentucky, right? Looking ahead at what's next, the next city, so to speak. But now that K-State's here, I don't view it as that much of a distraction. It could be obviously a good thing, an advantage for these players to be playing in front of friends and family, for them to play in the place they always dreamed about playing inside of. So sure, it could be somewhat of a distraction, but I think that's kind of behind them now as they're here and they're playing in an MSG, right? If this was a conversation we had a week ago about preparing for, Kentucky or Montana State, then sure. But I think that's past them. They're focused on this game against Michigan State.
You mentioned Michigan State wants to get out and run. You've covered a lot of K-State basketball this year. Does that play into K-State's hand? I mean, K-State kind of likes to go fast themselves, and I think this is a much better team when they get into the open court.
It's interesting because Tang early on in the year, maybe even in the preseason, he mentioned just how this team needs to adjust and adapt to the way that its opponent plays, right? And I think that Tang quickly realized that, hey, we can dictate our own games however we want, right? And so there's been games we saw on the road at Texas. K-State put up 116 points in regulation, right? Like that was just an offensive shootout. K-State didn't seem to care what it did on defense, And you look at the other end of the spectrum, K-State's won games, 62-54, stuff like that. And so playing it slow and making it a defensive game, if K-State wants to do that, sure. If K-State wants to go up and go up and down the court, sure. I think they can do whatever they want. Tang knows that his guys are capable as long as they buy into the game plan and know what's up with the scouting report. Michigan State's pace doesn't necessarily scare me if I'm a K-State fan. Can K-State go up and match it? Sure. They can also switch up the pace as well.
The Izzo effect. How much is Tom Izzo on the minds of those with the Kansas State program? This is a veteran coach. I've heard fans make a Bill Snyder comparison and how he preps his team and gets ready for these games. He's got an incredible record in the Sweet 16. Basically, you give him time to prepare, he will prepare for you. Is there any talk about going up against this coach?
I wouldn't say necessarily from the players. Obviously, there's an amount of respect that's there for sure, and Marquis Noel goes back with Tyson Walker. They actually have like pretty much the same story. Tyson Walker was at Northeastern. He's a New Yorker, and now he's at a Power 5 school and I think he's like a 6-foot point guard. So they go back, and there's a mutual respect. I think Marquis Noel probably thinks a little bit more highly of Tom Izzo than he does John Calipari at this moment. But Tom Izzo's a great coach, and you can't deny that. He's certainly one of the best in the sport. And yeah, I don't think that's much of a distraction or anything like that for this team. Daphne, you got your dogs in the studio as well?
Yeah, this is going to be something that will be an added feature to GoPowercat Lives. That was Daphne. Dude was in there earlier, and there's a chance he'll bark at any moment. Becky could come home and they'll just all hell will break loose. That's going to be part of this experience. Calipari, did that? I know they mended fences, but to be honest, I don't buy his story. I think he was being demeaning, and then later regretted it. I don't think it was just something that he was being inarticulate about. I think he knew at the moment what he was saying. And I think in retrospect, he thought, this kind of blew up. I screwed up. I got to undo this.
It seems like he's only sorry because he got caught.
Right.
Right. And the one thing you could say to defend Coach Cal is that Noel, he clearly is the shortest guy on the court for Kansas State. And so in the scouting reports, maybe that's the little guy, the little kid, whatever. Maybe that's just how they've addressed him and how they view him, because it's true. He is short, but I don't know what to think of it. But I think someone on Wabash Station posted today just how, is this really what we're talking about? Same thing with like the Jamar Samuels receipt stuff. Like, is this what we're talking about? K-State's here in the Sweet 16. So Marquis Noel obviously talked about it at the podium. Actually, I don't know if you saw this today, but he was asked about it, and he said, yeah, we're good. Me and Coach Cal, we exchanged texts, and it's all good. And I think Noel said he'll see him in the Hall of Fame. So we'll see if that happens.
Okay, let's put you on the spot. You were not a Marquis Noel fan last year, and I got my own frustrations with him, particularly that ending of the game. What was it, Iowa State, when he shot the dreadful three-pointer at the buzzer and got blocked. It's kind of remarkable how much Jerome Tang has changed this young man on and off the court. It is, honestly, it's kind of shocking how much different a person and player Marquis Noel is this season.
You surround him with a good roster, a good group of players, and it only makes him that much better. And that's not a knock on last season's squad, because Nigel Pack was certainly a playmaker. He's still dancing as we speak today. He's in Kansas City right now with Miami. But
ironic.
Sorry.
Ironic that he's in Kansas City.
Right. He got the region closer to Manhattan, Kansas. But yeah, I mean, Noel's come a long way. I think he really has. And for his journey, how he got here, it's hard not to enjoy how he plays. And he plays so fearless. And I think that's a legitimate reason why Kansas State has a true chance to make the Final Four, and it's not going to take a miracle. Obviously, the team is good. They have a sustainable way to win the games, but Marquis Noel is your guy to go get a bucket. Keontae Johnson can go get that bucket. Heck, Ish Massoud. I didn't think we'd be saying this, but for him to hit the dagger against Kentucky in the second round kind of tells you all you need to know about this team. They're fearless, and nothing's going to stop them from going out and making the game-winning play. So Noel is absolutely one of those guys, and K-State wouldn't be where it is without him and Massoud being the two holdovers.
I'm just so impressed with not just the program Jerome Tang's put together, but one of the things I always appreciated about Jack Hartman and Lon Kruger as coaches is they defined roles so well. This is what you do. If you step outside of this and it's not because of the shot clock going down or the clock or, something else there, we're going to have problems. And he calls it, with the Marquis at least, he called it putting them on real railroad tracks. You go as fast as you want, but this is your direction, which I loved. That's exactly what. And he seems to have cut out roles for these guys so well that they know what they're supposed to bring to the court. And Ish is incredibly comfortable with now being the 3-point marksman, which, he fancied himself to be and wasn't particularly last year, but is now. And with that, the defense from him is shockingly better at times. Sometimes he still reverts, but he did a really good job against Kentucky, as best K-State could do, and he hit the dagger. We talk about Marquise's growth. Ish has grown into this role too.
Yeah, and I think that's all coaching with Uric on the defensive side and Rodney Perry on offense. I mean, everybody does have their own roles on this team. And, I went back and watched some of the clips from the game against Kentucky. He only had 2 assists in the game, but they were just right place. Masood had the ball right where it needed to be and kind of threaded the needle, so to speak. And I think at the end of the day, the coaches probably deserve the credit for drawing up that play, but for Masood and the Cats to execute it, right? I mean, Masood deserves credit for that as well. So his stat line isn't ever going to, wow you, so to speak, but Masood had a plus-minus, a positive plus 13 against the Wildcats of Kentucky, the highest of any Wildcat. So people talked about his performance just based off the fact that he hit that dagger 3-pointer at the end, but Masood had, you look at the plus-minus, the best game of any Wildcat. And I know some coaches don't like to put that much stock into it. It could be misleading at times, but by and large, right, it's a good measuring stick of how your team performs with you on the court. So I mean, people have asked me, who's your favorite guy on the team? I'm like, well, I can't answer that. I'm not supposed to cheer, but Ish Masood really is just a fine young man. And talking with him, I asked him before the Montana State game, how the team has kind of gone about moving past the TCU loss at the end of the, regular season in the Big 12 tournament. And he just said, what loss? So he's a good guy and he's a good guy to interview. And absolutely, he's not the superstar of the team, but for him to go in and hit those clutch shots, back to go back to the main point is his role on this team. Everybody, Cam Carter, people want to bash him for what he maybe can't do on offense. He's the team's best defender. Noel and Johnson are the superstars. Naquan Tomlin can just score in one-on-one situations like none other. And everybody, top to bottom, Bebe has just such good post defense. When someone checks into this game, you know what you're getting pretty much every time.
Yeah, it's impressive how they understand what they're supposed to do. And if you're John Calipari, you looked at Keontae Johnson as the guy to stop. You had to stop him, and they did a good job with him. They hounded him throughout the game. Sure. But they kind of forgot about the little kid. Do you think Izzo will flip that a little bit and put more attention on Marquis Noel and maybe loosen up Keontae a little bit?
Yeah, I could see that teeter-tottering a little bit, and I think we saw it this season. Keontae Johnson, did he go through slumps where he might have hit a wall? Sure, but maybe that was because he was doing so good for X amount of games and the scout flipped, the script was on to stop him, right? And Noel, he had a little rough stretch in Big 12 play, which is funny because you think about where he is now, like it's just out of everybody's minds. But Noel did struggle in Big 12 play, and so these two guys on the court together, they've both got to have an on night. But if one has 27, like we saw Noel get against Kentucky, maybe the other guy only has to have 13 points or 14 points, which by their standards isn't that great, but I think most teams would take that as a second leading scorer. So yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, Fitz, man, like we always say, you got to have that third guy step up. And Desi Sills has been that guy lately. It was Naquan Tomlin in the non-conference, but Ish Masood did it against Kentucky in the round of 32. It's got to be somebody here against Michigan State.
Who is the third guy that when he steps up, K-State's at its best?
Man, it's a good question. I would say
that's
Desi.
Why I ask it.
Especially just because of the things that he does for Kansas State, like with his momentum, the momentum that he gives the team, his energy, his charisma, all that stuff. When Desi Sills is clicking, it just makes everything so much more exciting for Kansas State, right? Naquan Tomlin, probably you could make an argument that he could score more points or be the better player, whatever you want to say. but he doesn't energize the crowd the way that Desi Sills does. And, I mentioned Masood. He can be that guy. He's just not as consistent with stepping up and being that guy, but he certainly can be that guy. Absolutely. And then I think there's a little bit of a drop off. Bebe isn't the best on offense. He's certainly serviceable, but David Gassan's been battling injury. Cam Carter probably there more for his defense. So I would say Desi Sills, but it doesn't have to be Desi Sills. It can be anybody as long as Johnson and Noel get some help. They don't have to do everything on their own. If they can get somebody to complement them, watch out.
You mentioned Cam Carter. He's a guy that's had a really significant impact at times for this team. It's kind of feels like the season has gotten too long for him. He's not quite the same player he was. What's your assessment of where he's at, and can he make a resurgence here now that K-State's down to possibly 4 final games?
I think he can get there, yeah. He's a former 4-star recruit, and I don't know the ins and outs of his situation at Mississippi State, but it's a little head-scratching that he only played a couple games and averaged like a minute a game in those games. So, yeah, he's a Louisiana guy, and, the coaching staff obviously has a little bit of a connection there, and so he's a tough player, and we saw it early on against Kentucky. I think he was only hit one of his first 4 or 5, 6 field goals, but just the aggression, you got to love that. And for him to go attack the basket and try to make a play, that you can't be passive. For teams to win, like I mentioned, with Noel being that guy that can go out and make a play, you have to get up shots, right? And that's the same thing that we always talk about with turnovers, right? When you're not even getting a chance to score, it's hard to win. And so Kansas State with 8 turnovers against Kentucky, I'm sure we'll touch base on turnovers here in a second, but Cam Carter is you got to be aggressive. You can't be too aggressive because then you'll turn it over, right? If you're trying to hit the home run play. That's actually something that Cam Carter mentioned today, how the home run play, you can't try to hit those every single time. The simple plays oftentimes are better than the Sports Center top 10 plays. So, yeah, with Carter, man, I view him sort of as the glue guy for this team. I really do. Yeah. And he's, I think every team, if you can have a guy like that who also isn't afraid to go out and make a play, you've got to be happy with that, right, Daphne?
Yeah, there's nothing worse than when you're on the air and the producer's just in your ear wanting something, needing to communicate. I'm currently getting licked, which is not common for a producer, but if you're Daphne, that's how she rolls. Gilts, how do you feel about this game?
I feel good. And it's interesting because I've actually felt pretty skeptical with each of K-State's first 2 games. I thought the Montana State one was tricky just because of the upcoming road that Kansas State had, right? Playing in New York, potentially looking ahead at what Providence or Kentucky could bring, which, boy, Fitz, I don't know if you've seen this whole thing with Providence and Ed Cooley, man. That's a wild story. I think he put his house on the market before the regular season ended, and now he's at Georgetown. If I would have known that, I would have hammered Kentucky in that first round game. But,
no doubt.
I feel good about the Michigan State matchup because this team really does seem to be locked in, and they have those guys, right? I mentioned that a couple times now, but that's kind of the biggest reason why I'm, now a true, real believer on this team. And there doesn't appear to be a bad matchup on the Michigan State roster. Oscar Tshiebwe had 27 points and 17 rebounds or something like that. He was a beast down low in the paint. The first 2 offensive rebounds he got were before K-State even had an offensive possession. So for K-State to win against Kentucky and Oscar Tshiebwe, I think that puts to rest any sort of argument that you can make about any sort of matchup being an issue. I don't even think there is a matchup issue, but even if there was, K-State's going to find ways to work around that. So I feel good about this one. I really do. And it's a change of how I felt the last 2 games. I know I've been wrong on the first 2, so let's hope I am right for once. Unless you want me to just keep picking against K-State and then
no, you do you, Ryan Gilbert.
So I want your parlays. Just send me those real quick, please.
Yeah, no. I did do quite well betting on Kansas State straight up against Kentucky, and I will probably do the same. But speaking of gambling, does it kind of feel like, and I know the team isn't approaching it this way, and it wouldn't be good if they did, But for a fan, for us, Sweet 16 that's an achievement with this team, with the circumstances of Jerome Tang coming in and having to rebuild. And Sweet 16 is, this season's a wild success to me, no matter what happens Thursday in this game. Does it feel like there's house money here, that they're just playing and everything is a bonus and a bonus and a bonus and the super bonus at the end?
We said this on our PowerCat Questions podcast, and I just loved how my answer was this on the last. I can't talk today, but
that's cool.
Basically, yeah, K-State's playing with house money, right? But they kept on playing, and now they got like ace queen or something. They got a good hand, so they got to keep rocking with it. You know what I mean? You were to ask Tang this question in the beginning of the year, like he's got out and said it, right? Like they just wanted to make the NCAA tournament and just go see what happens from there. Like that was the goal. That quickly changed, and now this expectation is for them to win. So I obviously, grand scheme of things, you look at it, sure, this is just a remarkable job that Tang did in year one. And no matter what happens in Madison Square Garden on Thursday, K-State loses by 30. This was still a hell of a job by Tang, right? I get all that, but at the same time, you've got two third-team AP All-American players. You got two, Marquis Noel and Keontae Johnson, obviously, both were on the first team in the Big 12, right? Like you got guys on your team, and you mentioned, we both talked about a guy stepping up and being that third player. Like you look at this roster, man, it's pretty dang talented. It's pretty dang good. You look at his coaching staff, it's pretty dang good. So for them to make it to the Sweet 16, I mean, as a 3 seed, like this is what you are expected to do, right? You avoided 2 upsets and you won the games you were supposed to win. Obviously, Kentucky was favored by a point or 2 in that game in Greensboro, but and I can see why. Obviously, with Sheboy, that the size they had down low, but I think you are playing with house money, but you're dealt another good hand, and you might as well keep playing with it and running with it for as long as you can, because Marquis Noel is not going to be around next year, right? This is the last go around for a couple of these guys on the team, and so I don't know if Ish Massoud, who is a junior, is ever going to get the opportunity to play in his home city ever again. I don't think Naquan Tomlin is going to get a chance to play in Madison Square Garden as a collegiate athlete, right? So they've got obviously some tremendous building blocks for the future of K-State basketball, but playing in New York is just so special. And so Michigan State's going to be a tough draw just with Tom Izzo and the way they do play. The Spartans are favored, right? They're a 7 seed, but they're probably a little bit better than that, right? Like, yep. And then in the other half of the East region, Tennessee, I know, is without its best defensive player, but still, like Rick Barnes, another great coach in college basketball. And then even if FAU pulls off the upset, man, they're going to be rocking. They're going to have all the momentum in the world. There was no way in hell that K-State was going to lose to Loyola in 2018 as a 74th seed, wherever they were, and lo and behold, they beat them by 16, I think. And so it's March, and you never know what's going to happen. And Tang wouldn't even be listening to this conversation right now once I started talking about FAU and Tennessee, because the sole focus right now is on Michigan State. Go 1-0 with everything that they do has been his message consistently over the last couple of weeks since the calendar turned to March. Whether that's the meals you're eating, the sleep you're getting, the practices, the walkthroughs, the film sessions, getting in the weight room, going 1-0, and everything that this Kansas State team does has been the message from Coach Tang.
Okay, we got some questions here from the YouTube chat. What do you think are Michigan State's strengths and weaknesses? And that's from Joshua.
Joshua, absolutely, shooting the 3-pointer is their strength. They're the best Power 5 team in the country statistically at 3-point shooting percentage, right? And so I don't want to say you've got to minimize what Michigan State does from beyond the arc, because like I mentioned with Oscar Tshiebwe in Kentucky, right? Like you let him get his points, you let him get his boards, you can still beat him, right? So I'm not saying you can't let Michigan State shoot 15, 23 pointers and make 40% of those. Like you can still win, but at the end of the day, you do want to try your best to stop Michigan State from getting open looks from beyond the arc. And Fitz, you mentioned how Tom Izzo, it's not about the stars that you have by 24/7 Sports. It's about the type of player you are and your character and how hard you want to work, right? And so they're a group of players that, based off of what I've seen, just watching some of the highlights over the last couple of games, they're going to take the open look. They're an unselfish team. It's not about the ego, and they're not forcing shots. So what I'm getting at here is, they're taking smart 3-pointers, and there might be a reason they have such a good, 3-point field goal percentage from beyond the arc, because they're taking those good shots. Team players setting themselves up for good looks. And I don't know, as far as a weakness, this doesn't really glare as a weakness or something to watch out for. But the way that Michigan State, I guess this would be something to watch out for as far as a challenge for Kansas State, But like I said earlier, the way they do get out in transition and run it will certainly be something that K-State has to watch for and do its best to minimize, at least based off what we have heard from the players today in the locker rooms.
What is the weakness that maybe K-State can exploit?
Well, we talked about it, how if you want to change up the pace, can your dogs just like sit still for 5 seconds? Is that too much to ask?
No, you know that.
We talked about switching up the pace, right? And if Kansas State does want to have a one-up on Tom Izzo, maybe go run up and down the court, right? Maybe play Daphne's, maybe just switch up the pace on them. Here's like your reverse Uno, like, your reverse card on Uno. Like, we're gonna completely change the way this game is dictated and played. That could be the way to win this game for Kansas State and force them into an up and down battle, which I think is interesting, because that would make sense to flip the script on them. But with, like I just said, how K-State wants to prevent Michigan State from going up and down the court, I'd have to read between the lines a little bit here on maybe Tang's just bluffing and hoping that Tom Izzo's reading everything the media says that the players say to them. But getting up and down the court, changing the pace, I really do think could be something that does give K-State an upper hand on Michigan State.
Okay, so Puduk, I think is his name, wants to know what's more important here, limiting those 3-point shots from Michigan State or limiting Kansas State's own turnovers?
K-State's own turnovers.
Yeah, I agree.
It all starts with not shooting yourself in the foot. It really does. K-State hasn't lost a single game this season where the Cats had 13 or less, or I think it's 12 or less turnovers. Like, they're undefeated. As long as this K-State team doesn't turn the ball over, it's going to be a pretty good chance to win. And I'm not saying K-State can't win with 18, 19 turnovers, but it's a lot tougher to do that against a disciplined team like Michigan State in the NCAA tournament. So as much as you want to limit those shots that Michigan State does get from beyond the arc, it all starts from within, right? And you look at some of those games this year, man, opponents sometimes don't do anything to force the turnovers. Sometimes it's just K-State trying to do too much, and that's not a knock on the Wildcats. It's just kind of how it's been sometimes. And obviously that's not the case every time, but Michigan State's one of the worst teams in the country at forcing turnovers. And so if K-State does have 15, 16, 17 turnovers or 20 turnovers, it's likely going to be K-State's own fault. And so I would have to go with that being the bigger issue for Kansas State in this game.
Okay, give me your prediction.
Oh, man, I'm not the best with score predictions, but
just give me a spread.
I think K-State wins. K-State's going to win. They're going to cover, obviously, that spread. What's it, 2 points now for the Spartans?
Today. Yeah.
Okay, but I think they do win outright. There's a lot of value there with the Cats being the underdog, and it's a little fishy, but you got to remember sometimes that maybe Vegas is just trying to get some money. It's Izzo. It's March. It's Michigan State. It's, all that stuff. And, we talked about the TCU game in the Big 12 tournament. We were all just mind blown about how the Horned Frogs were favored in that game. And K-State got out to a 9-10 point lead within the first couple minutes of that game. And we were like, yeah, we're right. And then from there on out, it was all Horned Frogs. So you never know what to expect in this game. And I will go ahead and say that I predict K-State to win, cover the spread. I'll go somewhere in the ballpark of 75-71. If K-State wants to win this game, and if K-State wants to win the next 4 games, you're going to need a Marquis Noel to step up in the final moments. You're going to need that Ish Massoud to step up and hit that 3-pointer. And I think it's interesting. Keontae Johnson on the very next possession of that Kentucky game, he hit a 3-pointer right after Ish Massoud, but Ish Massoud's just the one that kind of stole the spotlight on that. And if there was any hope that, Kentucky did have, Johnson just put that to rest. And so these games are all going to be close for Kansas State. I do not see this team winning by double digits in any of their upcoming games if they make it that far. And so it's going to be a, 1-2 point game one way or another with a couple minutes left. And it's going to be up to whichever team wants it more. And obviously whichever team has the clutch DNA within them. And K-State has exemplified that in March here against Kentucky, that they got the playmakers to do that. So I'll go K-State probably by 5 points.
I got them by 2. We both got them winning and advancing. And then they would play Saturday 0-7 in the last 7 Elite Eights for Kansas State basketball. We'll see if they got 2 wins in New York City. Yeah, I hope you got big plans tonight. Go get a slice, maybe a street hot dog. You seem like a guy that would eat a hot dog from a vendor, like just, sweat dropping in on the dogs. It sounds delicious.
I wish I could go grab our pizza box. We went to a slice, Pizza by the Slice place, and me and Zach got a whole pizza. And so, yeah, Zach's down in the workout room right now, and he's getting his steps in for the day. I'm being lazy here in the hotel room, but you know what? As much as sleeping in a hotel bed is not fun, there's nothing else I'd rather do than cover K-State for a couple more days. So we'll find out tomorrow what our future looks like for the rest of the weekend, won't we?
Well, I appreciate you taking the helm here and heading to New York and keeping track of Zach, and also upholding the job I do and being lazy in the hotel room. It's nice.
Yeah, it's tough, but someone has to do it, right?
I know, exactly. Well, that's it for this live, everyone. We're going to be doing this more and more often, hopefully on a daily basis in the future. I'm not sure. But that's Ryan Gilbert, and I am Fitz, and I'll get better at this, making sure I hit all the buttons right at the right time. Thanks for watching.